glad you're here. We are going to talk about another romantic composer today. Do you remember his name? I told you last week that he won a special prize from Brahms. His name was Dvorak, and we're going to talk about him today. He was born in 1841, and he lived to be 63 years old. When he was 6 years old, he started taking violin lessons and got really good at it. And then when he was 21, he decided to join an orchestra as the viola player, just so that he could hear music in a concert. He didn't have enough money to pay for a ticket to go to all those fancy concerts. So he thought, maybe if I'm in the orchestra, I can hear all of the great music while I'm playing it. And I can make some money too. So he did that. He would not be a romantic composer if he didn't have love problems, right? He fell in love with a woman, but as we have seen with our other fellow composers, she did not love him back. But he did write her a beautiful song in honor of her. Do you want to hear it? Here's the song. What do you think? Does that show how much he loved her? I think so. Sounds really pretty. But she married somebody else, and Dvorak actually married her sister. And they had 9 kids. But sadly, 3 of their kids died when they were just babies, which is very sad. He got really popular after he won that special prize from Brahms, and other composers started to notice him. One of the composers who really liked his piano quintet was the composer who wrote the music for the Nutcracker. Do you remember his name? Tchaikovsky. He was the Russian composer who wrote the music for the Nutcracker, and he said that he loved Dvorak's piano quintet. Let's listen to a little bit of it. That has some very beautiful chord changes in it. Very well written, so I can see why Tchaikovsky loved it. In 1875, this was a good year for Dvorak. His first son was born, and he started writing all kinds of great music that people loved. He wrote a string quintet, he wrote his 5th symphony, and he wrote the Serenade in E major, which you guys are going to listen to at home with your families today. He also wrote a song called Requiem, and this song is very religious because it talks about death and dying and being with God and what he believes about all of those things. So let's listen to a little bit of his Requiem. Part of his Requiem. He said that the song was supposed to be about how he's not afraid to die, but he does think that he'll be really sad to leave the people he loves behind. He went to London 9 times, and his 7th symphony was actually written for the people of London. Well, in 1892, he ended up moving to New York to be the director of the Music Conservatory. He took the job because it paid a lot better than the job he had in Czechia. When he went there, he ended up writing his Ninth Symphony, which is also called the Symphony from the New World. And this song, this symphony, is what made him very, very famous all over the world. This song was very influenced by the American music that he heard. In fact, Neil Armstrong took a copy of this song with him when he went to the moon in 1969. And in 2009, this song was voted the favorite symphony in a poll run by the ABC Classic Radio. Something cool about this song is that in its fourth movement, the melody at the very beginning is very familiar to all of us. I'm going to play it for you, and moms, if you're watching, I want you to think of what famous movie soundtrack sounds just like this. And kids, I want you to think of a song you heard in the last year or so that all the kids everywhere were singing because it was so fun. Okay? Let me play the beginning for you. Moms, what did it sound like? Did it sound like the soundtrack of Jaws? I think it did. I wonder if John Williams got his idea from that. And kids, tell me if you remember this song. Do you remember that song? The introduction to that song was from Dvorak's Ninth Symphony. Can you believe it? I think that's awesome. When he was 52 years old, he wrote a string quartet in F major. This song he wrote while he was vacationing with his family in Iowa. And he was so relaxed and having such a good time that he wrote this song in only 12 days, which is very impressive for a composer to finish a song that quickly. This song was very influenced by African American and Indian American music, so some people even call this the American String Quartet. He wanted the melody of this song to be so clear that he made sure most of the song only had one instrument playing the melody line the whole time, and all the other instruments were in the background. Somebody told him that they thought that was weird. That wasn't normal. If you're going to write a string quartet with 4 string instruments, you should let them share the melody and do harmony together. But he said this. He said, when I wrote this quartet in the Czech community of Iowa in 1893, I wanted to write something for once that was very melodious and straightforward, and dear Papa Haydn kept appearing before my eyes, and that is why it all turned out so simply, and it's good that it did. So he was very true to what he thought a song should sound like, no matter what other people said. He returns to Czechia in 1895 because he wasn't making as much money, and he was a little bit more popular in Europe than he was in America, and he was kind of homesick. He really wanted to go back to his country. He wrote a cycle of piano songs called Humoresque, and one of the songs in this cycle has been said that it is the most famous small piano work, second to Beethoven's Für Elise. Let's see if you've heard this before. Do you recognize it? It's called Humoresque, and the melody was actually used in one of the Animaniacs songs when the Slappy Squirrel would come on the scene. They kind of used that melody to represent that squirrel. He also said that the Humoresque number 6 was supposed to sound like people singing in the streets of New York on New Year's Eve. Well, one of my favorite Dvorak songs was the one that I played for you when you first started watching this video and I was drinking my tea. It's called the Concerto for Cello in B minor. Brahms said, "Had I known that one could write a cello concerto like this, I would have written one long ago." He thought it was very impressive. He wrote it when he was 54 years old. But what's weird is Dvorak never thought a cello should be a solo instrument. He didn't think anybody should write a cello concerto, and so he just finally decided he was going to try it to challenge himself. He even said, "I've just finished the first movement of a concerto for the cello. Don't be surprised." I was surprised myself, and I still wonder why I chose to embark upon something like this. He then said that it turned out to be one of the best concertos he'd ever written. The end of the concerto is very fun to listen to, and he described it like this. He said, "The finale ends gradually in a diminuendo, like a slow exhalation. With reminiscence from the first and second movements, the solo fades away to pianissimo, then there is a crescendo, and the last measures are taken up by the orchestra, ending stormily. That is my idea, and I cannot abandon it." And the reason he said that was because somebody told him that they thought he should change the ending because they didn't like it. But Dvorak was very confident in what he wrote, and he said, "I am not changing it. That is exactly what I wanted it to sound like." So let's listen to the end. Do you think he should have changed it or kept it like that? He loved to write music to poems. He read a lot of poetry and he always wanted to write music for the poetry that he loved. One of the poems that he wrote was called The Water Goblin. It's a very sad story, but the music is really cool because each character has their own song. And so every time a new character comes into the story, the music changes to match that character. I'll show you the beginning because the beginning is the music for the Water Goblin, when the Water Goblin comes into the story. Time you hear that, you know the Water Goblin is coming. He wrote another symphonic poem to some gypsy songs, and one of the songs is called Songs My Mother Taught Me. It's very beautiful. It's one of his most famous songs, and I highly encourage you to go back and listen to it. Well, some other little things about Dvorak. There were 2 movies made about him, and an asteroid was named after him. Some people have said he is the most versatile composer of his time because he was able to write so many different kinds of music. The song you're going to listen to today is called Serenade in E major. This is his most popular song. It was written in less than 2 weeks, and it's one of the songs that he wrote when he had that really happy year when his first child was born, and he was writing lots of music and his concerts were successful, and this is one of the songs he wrote and people have loved it for years. When you listen to it, I encourage you to listen for the dynamics, Is it loud or soft? Listen to the rhythm and the tempo. How fast is it? Or is it slow? Or is it medium? Listen for what instruments are used. See if you can recognize the instruments. And talk about how it makes you feel. What do you think when you close your eyes and listen to the music? Also, I have my last question for you. Dvorak studied music theory for years, and he studied very hard. Music theory is basically the science of music. How does music work? How do notes fit together? What makes it sound good? And he studied that a lot. So my question to you is, do you think it's important that composers study music theory like you would study math or science or history? Do you think they should have to study music theory to make good music, or should they just think of what sounds good in their head? What do you think helps somebody write a really beautiful song? Talk about that with your families, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.